Alright, this is going to be chapter 14. Sorry about that. Power, influence, and leadership, from becoming a manager to becoming a leader. We're going to start going over the terms as they appear in the book, and then we will go through the sections of this chapter. The first term that we'll find highlighted in the text is leadership. Leadership is the ability to influence employees to voluntarily pursue organizational goals. Power is the ability to marshal human, informational, and other resources to get something done. Personalized power. Power directed at helping oneself as a way of enhancing their own selfish ends may give the word power a bad name. Socialized power. Power directed at helping others. Legitimate power, which all managers have, is power that results from managers' formal positions within the organization. Reward power, which all managers have, is power that results from managers' authority to reward their subordinates. Coercive power, which all managers have, results from managers' authority to punish their subordinates. Expert power is power resulting from one's specialized information or expertise. Referent power is power derived or deriving from one's personal attraction. Influence tactics are conscious efforts to affect and change behaviors in others. And we're going to talk about 9 influence tactics. The first being rational persuasion. Rational persuasion is trying to convince someone with reason, logic, or facts. Inspirational appeals is trying to build enthusiasm by appealing to others' emotions, ideals, or values. Consultation is getting others to participate in planning, decision-making, and changes. Ingratiation, getting someone in a good mood prior to making a request. Personal appeals, referring to friendship and loyalty when making a request, asking a friend to do a favor. Exchange, making explicit or implied promises and trading favors. Coalition tactics, getting others to support your efforts to persuade someone. Pressure, demanding compliance or using intimidation or threats. Legitimating tactics, basing a request on authority or right, organizational rules or policies, or explicit implied support from superiors. Okay, the next term is going to be trait approaches to leadership, which attempt to identify distinct characteristics that account for the effectiveness of leaders. Next term is narcissism, is defined as having a self-centered perspective, feelings of superiority, and a drive for personal power and glory. Machiavellianism displays a cynical view of human nature and condones opportunistic and unethical ways of manipulating people, putting results over principles. Psychopathy is characterized by lack of concern for others, impulsive behaviors, and a dearth of remorse when the psychopath's actions harm others. Global mindset is your belief in your ability to influence dissimilar others in a global context. Behavioral leadership approaches, which attempt to determine the unique behaviors displayed by effective leaders. Task-oriented leadership behaviors is to ensure that people, equipment, and other resources are used in an efficient way to accomplish the mission of a group or organization. Initiating structure leadership is leader behavior that organizes and defines, that is, initiates the structure for what employees should be doing to maximize output. Transactional leadership, focusing on clarifying employees' roles and task requirements and providing rewards and punishments contingent on performance. Relationship-oriented leadership is primarily concerned with the leader's interactions with his or her people. Consideration is leader behavior that is concerned with group members' needs and desires, and that is directed at creating mutual respect or trust. Empowering leadership represents the extent to which a leader creates perceptions of psychological empowerment in others. Psychological empowerment is employees' belief that they have control over their work. Ethical leadership represents normatively appropriate behavior that focuses on being a moral role model. Servant leadership focuses on providing increased service to others, meeting the goals of both followers and the organization, rather than to oneself. Passive leadership is a form of leadership behavior characterized by a lack of leadership skills. Laissez-faire leadership, a form of leadership characterized by a general failure to take responsibility for leading. Situational approach or contingency approach to leadership, who believe that effective leadership behavior depends on the situation at hand. Contingency leadership model determines if a leader's style is task-oriented or relationship-oriented, and if that style is effective for the situation at hand. Path goal leadership model, which holds that the effective leader makes available to followers desirable rewards in the workplace and increases their motivation by clarifying the paths or behavior that will help them achieve the goals and providing them with support. Full-range leadership suggests that leadership behavior varies along a full range of leadership styles, from passive, laissez-faire leadership at one extreme, through transactional leadership, to transformational leadership at the other extreme. Transformational leadership transforms employees to pursue organizational goals over self-interests. Charisma, a form of interpersonal attraction that inspires acceptance and support. Charismatic leadership, which was assumed to be an individual inspirational and motivational characteristic of particular leaders. Leader-member exchange LMX model of leadership emphasizes that leaders have different sorts of relationships with different subordinates. Okay, so that completes the vocabulary found in this chapter 14. So we move on to the major questions that we should be able to answer by the time that we've completed the slides and read through the chapter. We have 6 questions to ask. 1. How do effective leaders use power and influence? What does it take to be a successful leader? Do effective leaders behave in similar ways? How might effective leadership vary according to the situation at hand? What does it take to truly inspire people to perform beyond their normal levels? If there are many ways to be a leader, which one would describe me best? The nature of leadership. Although everyone is not suited to be a good leader, evidence shows that people can be trained to be more effective leaders. In response, more companies are using management development programs to build a pipeline of leadership talent. Total United States spending by organizations for leadership training was $61.8 billion in 2014 and $70.6 billion in 2015. People who pursue personalized power, which is power directed at helping oneself, as a way of enhancing their own selfish ends, may give the word power a bad name. However, there is another kind of power, socialized power, power directed at helping others. This is the kind of power you hear in expressions such as, "My goal is to have a powerful impact on my community." And leadership, they define it as the ability to influence employees to voluntarily pursue organizational goals. Within organizations, there are typically 5 sources of power that leaders may draw on. Legitimate power, which results from the manager's formal positions within the organization. Reward power results from the manager's authority to reward their subordinates. Coercive power results from the manager's authority to punish their subordinates. Expert power results from one's specialized information or expertise. And the last is referent power, derived from one's personal attraction, strong visionary leadership. Here's a question. Alex compliments his coworker Joe on the great job he did on the weekly report, and also informs their mutual boss. Alex is using blank power. Legitimate, referent, reward, or punishment? The answer is C. Reward. Common influence tactics. The ability to get others to follow your wishes is influence. Soft tactics are friendlier and less coercive than hard tactics. There are 9 ways to try to influence others. Soft tactics. Rational persuasion. Convincing someone by using logic, reason, or facts. Inspirational appeals. Building enthusiasm or confidence by appeals to emotions, ideals, or values. Consultation. Getting others to participate in a decision or change. Integrating tactics. Acting humble or friendly before making a request. Or, that's ingratiating tactics, Personal appeals. Referring to friendship and loyalty when making a request. Now these are hard tactics. Exchange tactics. Reminding someone of past favors or offering to make a trade. Coalition tactics. Getting others to support your effort. Pressure tactics. Using demands, threats, or intimidation. Legitimating tactics. Based on request or basing a request on implied support from superiors or on rules or policies. Research and practice provide some useful lessons about the relative effectiveness of influence tactics. Research has shown the following. Rely on the core. Core influence tactics. Rational persuasion, consultation, collaboration, and inspirational appeals are most effective at building commitment. Be authentic. Don't try to be someone else. Be authentic to your values and beliefs. Consult rather than legitimate. Some employees are more apt to accept change when managers rely on a consultative strategy and are more likely to resist change when managers use a legitimating tactic. Glad handling is not a good long-term strategy. Glad handling is when you greet or welcome someone warmly, such as a politician or a sales professional. In a study of salespeople, ingratiating improved short-term sales goals achievement, but reduced it in the long term. Glad handling may help today's sales, but not tomorrow's. Be subtle. Subtle flattery and agreement with the other person's opinion, both forms of ingratiation, were shown to increase the likelihood that executives would win recommendation to sit on boards of directors. Learn how to influence. Research with corporate managers of a supermarket chain showed that influence tactics can be taught and learned. Managers who received 360-degree feedback on 2 occasions regarding their influence tactics showed an increased use of core influence tactics. We created Figure 14.1 to provide an overview of what you will learn in this chapter. It presents an integrated model of leadership. Starting at the far right of the model, you see that leadership effectiveness is the outcome we want to explain. The center of the model shows this outcome is influenced by 4 types of leadership behavior: task-oriented, relationship-oriented, passive, and transformational. In turn, our ability to effectively engage in these leader behaviors is affected by traits, gender, and leadership skills, the left side of the model. And we have the power and influence and situational factors. Trait approaches to leadership. Trait approaches to leadership attempt to identify distinctive characteristics that account for the effectiveness of leaders. They play a central role in how we perceive leaders, and they ultimately affect the leadership effectiveness. This is why researchers have attempted to identify a more complete list of traits that differentiate leaders from followers. From Table 14.2, this shows an expanded list of both positive and negative interpersonal attributes often found in leaders. Here we have positive task-oriented traits, intelligence, conscientiousness, openness to experience, emotional stability, and positive affect. Some positive or negative interpersonal attributes: extroversion, positive; agreeableness is positive; emotional intelligence is positive. Now 3 negatives: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These 3 traits are often referred to as dark side traits. If you have a propensity for any of these, you need to know that the expression of dark side traits tends to result in career derailment, being demoted or fired. Narcissism, having self-centered perspective, feelings of superiority, and a drive for personal power and glory. Machiavellianism, displaying a cynical view of human nature and condones opportunistic and unethical ways of manipulating people, putting results over principles. Psychopathy, characterized by lack of concern for others, impulsive behavior, and a lack of remorse when actions harm others. The textbook compares these 2 leaders as examples of both positive and negative traits. So, we look at leadership at Tom's. Blake McCoskey is the founder. 1 for 1, he says. Every purchase should help someone in need. Donated 60 million shoes. Restored eyesight to almost 500,000 people. Provided safe water and childbirth services. And what positive leadership traits do you think McCoskey possesses? Well, we could go back. Positive. Well, intelligence, conscientiousness, positive affect. Obviously, they're emotionally stable. I'd say all of them. They're open to giving people chances. Now, leadership at Turing Pharmaceuticals. Martin Shkreli, founder and former CEO. Business strategy of buying rights to inexpensive but life-saving prescription drugs, raising prices astronomically. Public response is swift and negative. Shkreli pled not guilty, fraud related to other firms. Do you think he possesses any dark side traits? Absolutely. All of them. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, for sure. The increase in the number of women in the workforce has generated much interest in understanding the similarities and differences between female and male leaders. Research reveals these 4 conclusions. And we ask, do women and men display similar leadership traits? 4 conclusions drawn. Men displayed more task leadership and women more relationship leadership. 2. Women used a more democratic or participative style than men, and men used a more autocratic and directive style. Female leadership was associated with more cohesion, cooperative learning, and participative communication among team leaders or team members. Peers, managers, and direct reports and trained observers rated women executives as more effective than men. Men rated themselves as more effective than women evaluated themselves. Knowledge and skills are extremely important. A team of researchers identified 4 basic skills that leaders need: cognitive abilities, interpersonal skills, business skills, and strategic skills. What are cognitive abilities? They are abilities to identify problems and their causes in rapidly changing situations. And why? Leaders must sometimes devise effective solutions in short time spans with limited information. Interpersonal skills. To influence and persuade others, leaders need to work well with diverse people. Business skills. To maximize the use of organizational assets. Leaders increasingly need business skills as they advance up. 3 valuable skills that most people can develop are mindfulness, curiosity, and optimism. Strategic skills. To draft an organization's mission, vision, strategies, and implementation plans. Strategic skills matters for most individuals in the top ranks of an organization. Entrepreneurs may have their strategic skills tested on a regular basis. Trait theories offer 4 conclusions. We'll go into detail with each of them. The first, we cannot ignore the implications of leadership traits. Traits play a central role in the way we perceive leaders, and they do ultimately affect leadership effectiveness. For instance, focus, confidence, transparency, and integrity were among the top traits listed in a survey of current business leaders, along with patience, openness, and generosity. Total U.S. spending by organizations for leadership training was $61.8 billion in 2014 and $70.6 billion in 2015. The second conclusion. The positive and dark triad traits suggest the qualities you should cultivate and avoid if you want to assume a leadership role in the future. Elon Musk, founder of electric car manufacturer Tesla, is widely admired for his vision and daring, but admits to being a micromanager to an extreme degree. Limiting employees' freedom in this way is generally viewed as a negative quality in a leader. Personality tests and other trait assessments can help evaluate your strengths and weaknesses on these traits. The website for this book contains a host of tests you can take for this purpose. Organizations may want to include personality and trait assessments in their selection and evaluation processes. For example, Cisco's UK leader, Vice President Eleanor Kavanagh Lomas, uses data analytics, an algorithm designed to assess her management team's individual strengths based on a brief multiple-choice test. The app suggests how each person works best and how to motivate him or her. A global mindset is an increasingly valued task-oriented trait. As more companies expand their international operations and hire more culturally diverse people for domestic operations in the United States, they want to enhance employees' global mindset, your belief in your ability to influence dissimilar others in a global context. Behavioral approaches. Behavioral leadership approaches attempt to determine the distinctive styles used by effective leaders. They're divided into 4 categories. The first being task-oriented behavior, followed by relationship-oriented behavior, passive behavior, and transformational behavior. Maybe what's important to know about leaders is not their personality traits, but rather their patterns of behavior. This is the line of thought pursued by those interested in behavioral leadership approaches. The 4 categories will be discussed on the next slides. Task-oriented leadership behaviors. Task-oriented leadership behaviors these ensure that people, equipment, and other sources are used in an efficient way to accomplish the mission. Examples of task-oriented behaviors are planning, clarifying, monitoring, and problem-solving. However, 2 kinds are particularly important. 1, initiating structure leadership, and 2, transactional leadership. The 2 types that are defined here, the initiating structure leadership organizes and defines what employees should be doing to maximize output. Transactional leadership clarifies employees' roles and tasks requirements and provides rewards and punishments contingent on performance. Initiating structure leadership has a moderately strong positive relationship with leadership effectiveness, according to research. Transaction leadership also has a positive association with leader effectiveness and group performance. An example given is construction. Construction-related work may rely on task-oriented leadership behaviors, directing employees how to complete the task. Relationship-oriented leader behaviors. The relationship-oriented leadership primarily concerned with the leader's interactions with his or her employees. There's 4 types: consideration, empowering leadership, ethical leadership, and servant leadership. The emphasis of relationship-oriented leadership is on enhancing the employee's skills and creating positive work relationships among coworkers and between the leader and the lead, or the led. Such leaders often act as mentors, providing career advice, giving employees assignments that will broaden their skills, and empowering them to make their own decisions. The 4 types will be discussed on the next slide. Here we discuss consideration and empowering leadership. Consideration is an important type of behavior to use in addition to task leadership because it promotes social interactions and identification with the team and leader. Leader behavior that is concerned with group members' needs and desires, and that is directed at creating mutual respect or trust. Considerate leader behavior has a moderately strong positive relationship with measures of leadership effectiveness. Empowering leadership represents the extent to which a leader creates perceptions of psychological empowerment in others. Leading for meaningfulness, inspiring and modeling desirable behaviors. Leading for self-determination, delegating meaningful tasks. Leading for competence, supporting and coaching employees. And leading for progress, monitoring and rewarding employees. Psychological empowerment, employees' belief that they have control over their work. Increasing employees' meaningfulness, self-determination, competence, and progress. Ethical leadership represents normatively appropriate behavior that focuses on being a moral role model, includes communicating ethical values to others, rewarding ethical behavior, and treating followers with care and concern. Ethical leadership is clearly driven by personal factors related to our beliefs and values. It also has a reciprocal relationship with an organization's culture and climate. In other words, an ethical culture and climate promote ethical leadership, and ethical leadership in turn promotes an ethical culture and climate. Such leadership is positively related to employee job satisfaction, organizational commitment, organizational citizenship behavior, motivation, and task performance. It also is negatively associated with job stress, counterproductive work behavior, and intentions to quit. It appears that ethical leadership has many positive benefits. Servant leadership focuses on providing increased service to others, meeting the goals of both followers and the organization, rather than to oneself. This slide displays Table 14.4, the 10 characteristics of servant leader. Servant leadership is not a quick fix approach to leadership. Rather, it is a long-term approach to life and work. 10 characteristics of the servant leader are shown here. 1. Focus on listening. 2. Ability to empathize with others' feelings. 3. Focus on healing suffering. 4. Self-awareness of strengths and weaknesses. 5. Use of persuasion rather than positional authority. 6. Broad-based conceptual thinking. 7. ability to foresee future outcomes. 8. Belief they are stewards of their employees and resources. 9. Commitment to the growth of people. And 10. Build community within and outside the organization. Can we think of some examples of servant leaders? Famous examples might include Abraham Lincoln, Eleanor Roosevelt, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa. What makes these types of leaders so appealing to their followers? Passive leadership, a form of leadership behavior characterized by a lack of leadership skills. Laissez-faire leadership, a form of leadership characterized by a general failure to take responsibility for leading. For example, in the type of passive leadership called the management by exception style, managers do not intervene until problems are brought to their attention or until the problems become serious enough to demand action. Examples of laissez-faire leadership are seen in various kinds of failure: failing to deal with conflict, failing to coach employees on difficult assignments, and failing to help set performance goals, failing to give performance feedback, failing to deal with bullying, and so on. This passive leadership has a huge negative impact on employee perceptions of leaders, outweighing their positive perceptions of contributions by initiating structure. Transactional and consideration forms of leadership. Laissez-faire leadership is seen more in men than women. I'm not surprised. Not taking responsibility can hardly be considered leadership, although it often seems to be manifested by CEOs whose companies get in trouble, as when they say, "I had no idea about the criminal behavior of my subordinates." Two key conclusions we may take away from the behavioral approaches. The first, a leader's behavior is more important than his or her traits. It is important to train managers on the various forms of task and relationship leadership. And the second conclusion, there is no one best style of leadership. How effective a particular leadership behavior is depends on the situation at hand. Situational approaches to leadership. Beliefs that effective leadership behavior depends on the situation at hand, also called the contingency approach. There's two approaches, the contingency leadership style and the path goal leadership style. Perhaps leadership is not characterized by universally important traits or behaviors. As we noted above, there is no one best style that will work in all situations. That is, as situations change, different styles become appropriate. Both of the approaches will be discussed on these next upcoming slides. The oldest model of the contingency approach to leadership was developed by Fred Fiedler and his associates in 1951. The contingency leadership model determines if a leader's style is 1. Task-oriented, or 2. Relationship-oriented, and if that style is effective for the situation at hand. Fiedler's work was based on 80 studies conducted over 30 years. Are you task-oriented or relationship-oriented? That is, are you more concerned with task accomplishment or with people? To find out, you or your employees would fill out a questionnaire known as the Least Preferred Coworker, or LPC scale, in which you think of the coworker you least enjoyed working with and rate him or her according to an 8-point scale of 16 pairs of opposite characteristics, such as friendly and unfriendly, tense, relaxed, efficient, inefficient. The higher the score, the more the relationship-oriented the respondent. The lower the score, the more task-oriented. Three dimensions of situational control. Once the leadership orientation is known, task-oriented or relationship-oriented, then you determine situational control. How much control and influence a leader has in the immediate work environment. There are 3 dimensions of situational control: leader-member relations, task structure, and position power. Leader-member relations reflects the extent to which the leader has the support, loyalty, and trust of the work group. Task structure is the extent to which tasks are routine and easily understood. Position power refers to how much power a leader has to make work assignments and reward and punish. For each dimension, the amount of control can be high. The leader's decisions will produce predictable results because he or she has the ability to influence work outcomes. Or it can be low. He or she doesn't have that kind of predictability or influence. By combining the 3 different dimensions with different high or low ratings, we have 8 different leadership situations. These are represented in the diagram on the next slide. This here figure 14.1 is a representation of Fiedler's contingency model. We have here optimal leadership styles: task-motivated leadership, relationship-motivated leadership, and task-motivated leadership. Neither leadership style is effective all the time. Fiedler's research concludes, although each is right in certain situations, when task-oriented style is best. So task-oriented. The task-oriented style works best in either high control or low control situations, as depicted here. High control situations, task-motivated leadership. Low control situations, task-motivated leadership. Example of high control situation. Suppose you are supervising parking control officers ticketing cars parked illegally in expired meter zones, bus zones, and the like. You have 1. High leader-member relations because your subordinates are highly supportive of you, and 2. High task structure because their jobs are clearly defined. And here are the situational controls: the leader-member relations, task structure, and position power. So because we have high leader-member relations and high task structure, you have high position control because you have complete authority to evaluate their performance and dole out punishment and rewards. Thus, a task-oriented style would be best. When relationship-oriented style is best. These here. The relationship-oriented style works best in situations of moderate control. Example: suppose you were working in a government job supervising a group of firefighters fighting wildfires. You might have 1. Low leader-member relations if you were promoted over others in the group, but so that's over here, poor leader-member relations, and they refer to it as low leader-member relations because that we were promoted over them. And we also might have high task structure, as is shown here, because the job is fairly well defined. And 3, we might have low position power because the rigidity of the civil service job prohibits you from doing much in the way of rewarding and punishing. Thus, in this moderate control situation, relationship-oriented leadership would be most effective. Here's a question. Rayford is head of a task force consisting of his peers from other departments in the organization. Rayford has A. High leader-member relations, high task structure, high position power, or low position power. It would be true that Rayford has low position power because of the rigidity of the civil service job. The Path Goal Leadership Model. It's developed by House. A second situational approach advanced by Robert House in the 1970s and revised by him in 1996 is the Path Goal Leadership Model. The next slide is a general representation of House's revised path goal theory. So this model is the effective leader increases employees' motivation by clarifying the paths or behavior that will help them achieve goals and provides them with support. Two contingency factors or variables are employee characteristics and environmental factors, cause some leadership behaviors to be more effective than others. And here in this slide we have House's path goal theory. As the drawing indicates, two contingency factors or variables, employee characteristics and environmental factors, cause some leadership behaviors to be more effective than others. 1. Leader behaviors are, employee characteristics. 5 employee characteristics are locus of control from Chapter 11, which we didn't do, task ability, need of achievement, experience and need for path goal clarity. Environmental factors. Our 2 environmental factors are task structure, which is independent versus interdependent tasks, and work group dynamics. Leader behaviors. Originally, House proposed that there were 4 leader behaviors or leadership styles. Directive, here's what's expected of you and here's how to do it. Supportive, I want things to be pleasant since everyone's about equal here. Participative, I want your suggestions in order to help me make decisions. And achievement oriented, I'm confident you can accomplish the following great things. The revised theory expands the number from 4 to 8. House's revision of his theory also puts more emphasis on the need for leaders to foster intrinsic motivation through empowerment. Finally, we have work facilitation, supportive, interaction facilitation, group-oriented decision-making, representation and networking, and value-based behaviors. Finally, his revised theory stresses the concept of shared leadership. The idea that employees do not have to be supervisors or managers to engage in leader behavior, but rather may share leadership among all employees of the organization. I think you find quite a bit of that within the military ranks. Applying situational theories. How can you make situational theories work for you? A team of researchers proposed a general strategy managers can use across a variety of situations. It has 5 steps. To describe them, we use an example of a sales manager. Step 1. Identify important outcomes. First, identify the goal or goals you want to achieve. For example, a sales manager's goal might be to increase sales by 10% or reduce customers' complaints by half. Step 2. Identify relevant leadership behaviors. Next, identify the specific types of behaviors that may be appropriate for the situation at hand. A sales manager might find path goal clarifying, work facilitation, and supportive behaviors more relevant for the sales team than work facilitation. Don't try to use all available leadership behaviors. Rather, select 1 or 2 that appear most helpful. Step 3. Identify situational conditions. Fiedler and House both identify a set of potential contingency factors to consider, but there may be other practical considerations. For example, the need to manage a virtual sales team with members from around the world will affect the types of leadership that are most effective. Step 4. Match leadership to the conditions at hand. Use your knowledge about power and influence to find the best match between your leadership styles and behaviors and the situation at hand. A sales manager might find it useful to use the empowering leadership associated with work facilitation behaviors and avoid directive leadership. Step 5. Decide how to make the match. Managers can use guidelines from either contingency theory or path goal theory, change the person in the leadership role, or change his or her behavior. The organization employing the sales manager might move him or her to another position because the individual is too directive and does not like to empower others. Or the sales manager could change his or her behavior if possible. The uses of transformational leadership. Transformational leadership, employees are encouraged to pursue organizational goals over self-interests. Leaders are influenced by individual characteristics and organizational culture, whereas transactional leaders try to get people to do ordinary things. Transformational leaders encourage their people to do exceptional things. It's important to note that transactional leadership is an essential prerequisite to effective leadership, and the best leaders learn to display both transactional and transformational styles of leadership to some degree. Indeed, research suggests that transformational leadership leads to superior performance when it augments or adds to transactional leadership. Transformational leaders, in one description, engender trust, seek to develop leadership in others, exhibit self-sacrifice, and serve as moral agents, focusing themselves and followers on objectives that transcend the more immediate needs of the work group, whereas transactional leaders try to get people to do ordinary things. Transformational leaders encourage their people to do exceptional things. Significantly higher levels of intrinsic motivation, trust, commitment, and loyalty that can produce significant organizational change and results. Can students think of some examples of transformational leaders? Famous examples might include Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Oprah Winfrey, Winston Churchill, Steve Jobs. What makes this style of leadership so appealing? 4 key behaviors of transformational leadership. Inspirational motivation. Let me share a vision that transcends us all. Idealized influence. We are here to do the right thing. Individualized consideration. You have the opportunity to grow and excel here. Intellectual stimulation. Let me describe the great challenges we can conquer together. Examples. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. had a vision, a dream, as he put it, of racial equality. Candy Lightner, founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, had a vision of getting rid of alcohol-related car crashes. Apple computer Steve Jobs had a vision of developing an insanely great desktop computer. To recruit John Scully, who was CEO of Pepsi at the time, Jobs asked, "Do you want to sell sugared water the rest of your life, or do you want a chance to change the world?" Transformational leaders have charisma, a form of interpersonal attraction that inspires acceptance and support. At one time, charismatic leadership, which was assumed to be an individual inspirational and motivational characteristic of particular leaders, much like other trait theory characteristics, was viewed as a category of its own, but now it is considered part of transformational leadership. Someone with charisma, then, is presumed to be more able to persuade and influence people than someone without charisma. Implications of transformational leadership for managers. It can improve results for both individuals and groups. It can be used to train employees at any level, and it requires ethical leaders. You can use the 4 types of transformational behavior just described to improve results for individuals, such as job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and performance. You can also use them to improve outcomes for groups, an important matter in today's organization where people tend not to work in isolation, but in collaboration with others. Not just top managers, but employees at any level can be trained to be more transactional and transformational. This kind of leadership training among employees should be based on an overall corporate philosophy that constitutes the foundation of leadership development. While ethical transformational leaders enable employees to enhance their self-concepts, unethical ones select or produce obedient, dependent, and compliant followers. The ethical things that top managers should do are on the next slide. To better ensure positive results from transformational leadership, top managers should follow these practices. Table 14.6. Employ a code of ethics. The company should create and enforce a clearly stated code of ethics. Choose the right people. Recruit, select, and promote people who display ethical behavior. Make performance exceptions reflect employee treatment. Develop performance expectations around the treatment of employees. These expectations can be assessed in the performance appraisal process. Emphasize the value of diversity. Train employees to value diversity. Reward high moral conduct. Identify, reward, and publicly praise employees who exemplify high moral conduct. As we get to the conclusion of the slides, this is actually the last content slide, and then we'll move on to the appendix, and those will be silent slides. Those will be we can pause it and read it. So here's a question. Jim, a manager, uses rewards and discipline to motivate subordinates, but does this in a way of helping them reach their full potential. This is called what? What type of leadership? Again, he uses rewards and discipline to motivate subordinates, but does this in a way of helping them reach their full potential. What type of leadership is it? Contingent leadership, transformational leadership, developmental consideration, or democratic leadership? It would be B, transformational leadership, because he's using rewards and discipline to motivate subordinates, but does it in a way to help them reach their full potential, and they helps them reach their full potential. And that's what transformational leaders do. Here is Appendix 1 for Chapter 14, an integrated model of leadership. So this is the text that would go along with Figure 14.1, the integrated model. Next, this is the last slide, Appendix 2, representation of Fiedler's contingency model.